When a nurse performs a procedure, how do we actually know it's the best way to do it? It can't just be about tradition or, this is how we've always done it. It's got to be about investigation. Nursing research is really all about being a detective, searching for that hard evidence that helps us build better, safer healthcare for everyone. Okay, let's dive in. We're going to open up the Nurse Investigator's Toolkit and see exactly how they find those crucial answers.
This right here, this is the fundamental question. It drives everything. Seriously, every single guideline, every protocol, every standard of care you see in a hospital or clinic has to answer this one question. And the answer? It can't be just an opinion. It has to be built on solid data.
And here's the official mission statement, so to speak. The American Nurses Association calls it a systematic inquiry. Now, that word, systematic, that is the absolute key. It means there's a structured, methodical process. It's not just a random hunt for information. It's about carefully building a foundation of knowledge for the entire profession.
So, how do we pull off that systematic inquiry? Well, it's through data collection. This is the absolute heart of the investigation. It's the planned, consistent process of gathering the facts, the numbers, the stories, everything we need to answer that big original question: is this practice effective and safe?
And listen, the stakes could not be higher. This is not just some academic exercise. If the data collection is flawed, if the information we gather is wrong or biased, then the conclusions are going to be wrong. And that can lead to clinical practices that are, at best, ineffective and at worst, actually harmful. Getting this part right is absolutely critical for patient safety.
All right, so let's crack open that toolkit. The first set of tools we're going to look at are all about gathering information directly from the source, from the patients and the people involved. This is really the art of asking good questions, and, just as importantly, carefully listening to the answers.
Okay, first up, the most direct tool we have, the interview. You can think of it as a conversation, but a conversation with a very specific purpose. A researcher can sit down with someone and get that rich, detailed information that you just can't get from ticking boxes on a form. You can dig deeper, you can ask follow-up questions, and you can really get a sense of someone's unique perspective. Next in the kit, we've got the questionnaire. Think of this as a highly structured interview, but in writing. It's a set of questions, either on paper or online, that participants answer themselves. This is an incredibly efficient way to gather a whole spectrum of information from a really large group of people all at once.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because you have to pick the right tool for the job. Look at the trade-offs. Interviews, they give you incredible depth and flexibility. Plus, they're great for people who might have a tough time with reading or writing. But they take a lot of time. Questionnaires, on the other hand, are perfect for reaching huge, widespread groups. But you lose that depth, and you can't clarify a confusing question. And check out that response rate for mailed questionnaires, sometimes as low as 25%. That can be a real issue if you're trying to get a good representative sample.
But what about stuff that's really hard to describe in words? Things like pain or anxiety or nausea. For that, investigators pull out a more specialized tool, scales. These are designed to be way more precise than a simple question. They're all about turning a subjective feeling into a measurable piece of data. And this is a perfect example, one of the most common types, the visual analog scale for pain. It's literally just a 100-millimeter line. On one end, it says no pain, and on the other, worst possible pain. The patient just makes a mark on the line where their pain is. The researcher then measures the mark in millimeters, and boom, just like that, a personal feeling becomes an objective number. So simple, but so powerful.
Okay, but what if what people say they do isn't the whole story? Sometimes the most powerful data doesn't come from asking questions at all. It comes from watching. So let's look at the next set of tools in our kit, which are all about direct observation and really precise physical measurements.
The observation method is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. The researcher watches people and systematically records what they do. So, for example, a study might observe nursing students to see how consistently they're actually following hand hygiene protocols with patients. This is huge because it captures what people do, not just what they say they do.
Now, you can do this in two main ways. Structured observation is super planned out. The researcher has a checklist or a rating scale, and they're just counting specific behaviors they've defined beforehand. It's all about getting hard numbers. Unstructured observation is kind of like being a documentary filmmaker. You just observe what's happening spontaneously and record events as they unfold naturally. This gives you a really rich, big-picture view, but you have to be super careful that your own biases don't start creeping in.
And now, for the most objective tools in the entire kit, Biophysiological measurements. This is where we take data directly from the human body using clinical instruments. Think blood pressure cuffs, heart rate monitors, and lab tests. This method really moves away from human interpretation and relies on calibrated equipment, which makes the data incredibly accurate and valid.
These measurements fall into two main buckets. First, you have in vivo measures. In vivo just means in the living. So these are measurements taken directly on a person, like their blood pressure or an ECG. Then you have in vitro measures. In vitro means in glass, and these are tests done on samples taken from a person, like analyzing blood chemistry or running a urinalysis in a lab.
Okay, so we've covered asking, watching, and measuring. But what if the data you need already exists? Well, the final category in our toolkit is all about using information that's already out there and has already been collected. This is called record analysis, and it's another form of detective work, really. Researchers can analyze existing documents and data to find answers to brand new questions. The huge plus here is that you don't even have to interact with subjects. The clues are already there, just waiting in the files.
And the key takeaway here is that there is a massive amount of valuable data already floating around. Researchers can systematically go through patient medical records, hospital databases, huge national health surveys, even internal policy documents, and they can analyze practice patterns, patient outcomes, and health trends on a gigantic scale.
And of course, for some really specific or complex questions, the toolkit gets even more specialized. Researchers might use things like projective techniques, like the Rorschach ink plots, to try and understand subconscious feelings. Or they might use vignettes, which are short, written stories used to see how someone would respond to a specific clinical situation. Pretty cool stuff.
So, there you have it, the Nurse Investigator's Toolkit in a nutshell. First, you can ask and listen, using things like interviews, questionnaires, and scales. Second, you can watch and measure, using direct observation and biophysiological tools. And third, you can analyze the evidence that's already there, through record analysis. The right tool always depends on the question you're trying to answer.
So, the next time you see a nurse perform a task or follow a protocol, you can think like an investigator. Just ask yourself, what's the evidence behind this? What tools from the toolkit were used to prove that this is the best, safest way to provide care? Because behind every single great nursing practice is a great investigation.